Hi, I'm Zain Verjee at the Global AI Summit on Africa. We are bringing you a special embedded podcast series in partnership with the Rwanda Centre for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. I'm so excited to have the CEO and founder of Amini AI, Kate Kallot, with me in the studio. Kate Kallot, thank you so much for joining me on Embedded today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I'm so thrilled to see another woman here at this conference wearing a smart suit and some really fantastic trainers. Both of us are thinking the same.
We are.
Right? So we're running around a lot, but we're entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And so we feel like we have the right to wear trainers and pick comfort over style, right?
Absolutely.
So I already adore you. So thank you. Thank you for not making me feel so lonely out there. Kate, you have so many achievements and accolades and awards. And I know there's a huge amount of hard work behind all of that.
Yeah.
When you look at your journey and reflect today, what stands out to you that made you a success and made you who you are?
I think for me, it's really thinking about where I came from. You know, my family is from Central African Republic, which is a country that has been plagued because of their natural resources and hasn't been able to capitalize on that in the past. And for me, thinking about this ex-colonial model of extraction and applying this to technology is really what has driven me over the past couple of years. And everywhere I've been, in every technology companies that I've worked in, I've really tried to be a voice for Africa, for our youth, and to democratize technology access on our continent. And until I realized that I had hit that ceiling, and to make that change, I actually needed to come back home and build it from the ground. I think this was really my aha moment. And that's where not just my career, but the platforms on which I was invited to speak, the platform on which I was representing the entire youth of Africa, who is extremely digitally savvy and also understands machine learning, understands data science, and showing that actually a deep tech company can come from Africa only happens from then.
Now, you're living in my country, Kenya, and I've never even visited the Central African Republic. So, so you're going to have to take me around one day.
Absolutely.
Okay. But, you know, what was your breakthrough moment? I mean, as you were building, as you were an entrepreneur starting out in a space that isn't so popular as it is today, and as a woman coming into this space, like, what was it like for you to just break through and have your first success?
It was very difficult at the beginning, you know, because I'm an African woman, solo founder. You don't find this everywhere. And on top of that, I'm doing AI. So 3 years ago, ChatGPT moment had not happened. You know, we were knocking at doors and everybody was like, what is this AI? We don't really understand. We used to invest in fintech and e-commerce, come back later. But then that moment happened. And I think everybody started to realize that AI is real and it's here to stay. And us in Africa, we also need to have a voice in that. And this is really where things starting to change for us. And then people really started to look at my background, look at the background of the team, and realize that we had assembled really a team of Avengers on the continent. Brilliant talent coming from the top companies in the world, and really just passionate about building something for our continent, for our people, for our communities.
Right place, right time.
Yeah.
But also you did the hard work, the difficult pieces when it wasn't so popular, when no one was looking and paying attention. So congratulations.
Thank you.
For that and for your accomplishments. And, you know, understanding the entrepreneurial journey is extremely tough.
It is.
And you've really made a mark. So you have created Amini AI. Tell us a little bit about Amini and what it does.
We are a data infrastructure company, and we're building the data stack and the data infrastructure for Africa and the Global South. What we realized is that when you think about the AI value chain, data is the most important. It is the fuel of AI, right? And when you think about all the data platforms that exist in the world, they've not been built for context. They've not been built with Africa in mind. They assume that there is abundance of digitized data that they can use to process and train a lot of the models. And they also assume that the entire world is connected. Whereas the digital divide is still real. You still have 2.6 billion people that are unconnected in the world, which means there's no data on them. We've built Amini with the intention of solving for that data scarcity, but also preparing our countries to be AI ready.
So how do you go about doing that? If I'm a government, if I'm a SME, if I'm a lonely entrepreneur and I want to come to Amini, what do you do for me using your expertise?
Yes, we digitize, we collect, we aggregate large amount of data, and then we process it and structure those data sets, because that data, when it comes into our platform, is fully unstructured. You know, one of the things we realized very early is that you have a lot of private sector companies, governments, even small startups or cooperatives in farming, for example, who are sitting on a large amount of data but do not know what to do with it. And their data alone doesn't mean anything. But coupled with other data and structured, that's when you are actually able to extract interesting insights.
So when you're taking the unstructured data and structuring it, what is the framework that you're putting around that? I mean, you're chunking it per topic and then labeling it and putting it in Markdown files, building RAG.
We have RAGs as well.
So is that the process?
So we're starting with everything that's tied to environmental, because the natural capital is still the pulmonary of our economies. You think about agriculture, minerals, energy. So
that's the expertise.
That's the expertise, yeah. Not the agriculture space, but more the geospatial space, really, and being able to correlate any data points that's coming with what it means in the physical world. So when this happens, when you bring data to our platform, we're actually able to fusion that data with other types of data, like geospatial data from satellite, like data from drones, IoT sensors, data from our data catalog, even socioeconomic data. Because what you want is really understanding the impact of this on the livelihoods of your communities, right? And of your people or on your economy. So we are fusioning all those data. We're able to fusion up to 1,000 different data points coming from multiple different sources, and then structuring that data to really start asking questions and extract insights that we're not able to understand before.
So if I'm a farmer or I have a large agricultural tract and I come and I give you my data and you structure it, what's fusion data? Using other data points to...
Yes.
Okay.
yes, that's what it is.
Just, still learning.
Yes.
And so when you query the then structured data that you have, what types of insights then would you get were I to use that example as a farmer?
Yeah, you're able to understand the health of your soil. You're able to understand the health of your crop. You're able to understand any pest and disease, also forecast any yield you will have in a specific season, but also even understand where there will be extreme weather events. So, really understand weather and climate and how it affects the growth of your crop and how much you expect it to generate into a specific season.
What are some of the challenges that you're having on the continent? Because you outlined, all of the issues, the connectivity, the digital divide. Existing models aren't necessarily built for us.
Yeah.
So how do you overcome those and what do you continue to face?
I think the first challenge and the biggest we've faced is that when I go and walk in rooms in governments, I'm usually not the face they're expecting to see when you think about AI. And so
good. That's good. Come on.
That's great. It's a big point.
Now you then are automatically in an advantageous position because they're not going to underestimate you.
They do, absolutely. But also, I'm not in big tech anymore. It would have been much easier for me to still be working at NVIDIA and walking into those rooms today. But I'm doing it from the perspective of the diaspora who came back and decided to take everything I had learned and built from the continent, something that's really adapted to us. And I do think that there is still a lot of work that we need to do with our leaders to really deconstruct those biases that have been created by the rest of the world, that AI innovation is only driven from there. Like, we're not capable of innovating in our countries. And I need them to understand that actually the technology we build is more adapted for their countries than the technology that's built in the US or Europe. So they should give precedence to entrepreneurs who are bringing them solutions on the table that are fully tailored and custom made for their countries. This is probably the biggest challenge. The first government who gave us a chance was not a government in Africa.
Who was it?
Government of Barbados.
Really?
Yes. Prime Minister
Mia Mottley.
Yes.
I was just going to say, there's someone who would just jump on that and lead the charge. So
yes.
So that makes sense.
She has led the charge. I used to live in Barbados during COVID, so it's also home. And she was the first to take a chance. She was the first to understand that really the way she will lead in AI and the way she will build our own data infrastructure will not come from someone in the US coming to tell her how to do it. It will come from someone who really has an intimate relationship to the problem and understands the country.
You're listening to a special episode of the Embedded podcast here in Kigali, Rwanda, at the Global Summit on AI in Africa.
Right now, AI only works for major languages such as English and French. This presents an issue in Africa when it comes to accessing quality datasets that power AI technologies. You see, 76% of Rwandans only speak Kinyarwanda. Over the last 7 years, we have created datasets of over 3,400 hours of Kinyarwanda. We have now scaled to 14 other countries in Africa with datasets covering 16 additional languages. We're accelerating our work with the support of the Rwanda Centre for Fourth Industrial Revolution, expanding African language footprint in AI technologies. By providing this foundational infrastructure, innovators can create AI solutions that reflect Africa's linguistic diversity and unique cultural realities.
You're listening to a special episode of the Embedded podcast here in Kigali, Rwanda, at the Global Summit on AI in Africa. If I'm a head of state and I'm looking at all the data that I have in my country, where do I even start with collating the data, even if it's unstructured? Where do I even start with making sure it's collected ethically? How do I go about building that out for someone like yourself?
Start by breaking the silos. There's a lot of silos, even in ministries and government agencies. There are a lot of data there, but all of it doesn't interact or talk to each other. And that's already a major problem, because how are you a minister of finance, but you don't have access to agriculture, you don't have access to mineral data? All of this is scattered and hosted somewhere else and no one is sharing. This is a huge problem we've seen with every government we've talked to. Those silos are contributing to us not being able to make any progress, any meaningful progress. So the first thing is to start breaking those silos. The second one is, once you've broken the silos and you've aggregated the data, now you're able to have a picture as to what data you're missing. And most of the time, you don't have to send hundreds of thousands of people to collect data. You would realize that all that data aggregated, you only need maybe 10, 20% to add on top of it to really be able to have a full picture of what's happening in your country.
Why do you think that the silos still remain and there's still resistance? Are there risks?
I'm not sure if there are risks at the government level, but I think it's more legacy, how we've been operating in the past. And I think governments today, probably ministers want to show that they're doing great. So Ministry of Agriculture will say, I'm going to deploy 100,000 field agents to go collect yields in farmers. And then you have the livestock agency who is going to do the same. And then you have seeds and inputs, seeds, fertilizers and such who are going to do the same. And then no one is actually aligning. I think it's just that mindset of collaboration and sharing that has not been ingrained in our ministries and in our economies up until now that we now need to break.
How do you see data sovereignty?
I think for me, the data sovereignty question is more of a data ownership question. When I see what is happening today in the world, and I mentioned the colonial past of Central African Republic, I see it's my mission to make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes of the past. I see data as being, we talk about data as being the new oil, as really being one of those resources that's fueling AI systems. And as of today, what is happening is that only 2% of African data actually gets processed on the African continent. So most of the
2%?
2%. We don't have capacity locally. Most of our data is sent elsewhere. And that's really sad because you know what's happening?
Yeah, our data is used elsewhere to train and build other models.
Exactly.
And other companies profit from that and sell it back to us.
Exactly, at a premium.
Yeah, exactly.
So the economic value creation that the data is supposed to do for us is actually created elsewhere. And we have to stop this. We have to start thinking about how we're able to put together or put in place the right guardrails for us to really be able to benefit from this AI revolution and generate the trillions of dollars that this is supposed to generate. Because otherwise we'll recreate the exact same patterns that have happened in the past, whether it's from natural resources standpoint or even from a technology standpoint. There's no reason why the woman in the village knows how to use WhatsApp, but has no local way to understand information that is relevant to her.
When we're talking about data, and I'm listening to you, like, we're talking about big data,
Yes.
right? What about small data? How do you see the development of very local contexts or companies, organizations and entities that have, their pieces of data, but don't know how to process it, what to do with it? How important do you see that as building sort of an entire ecosystem of smaller data set gathering?
I see this as super important, and that's one of the work we're doing as a company. At the moment we started, we thought that it was very important for us to address the entire ecosystem. So we have a network of data partners that are giving us data, and we're doing a revenue share model with them. So we're sending capital back into the hands of the community so they're able to own their data, but also extract value out of it. So it's a less extractive
and more ethical
relationship and more ethical, and they're really able to benefit from the models and the system that are using their data. And I think this is the only way we will actually thrive, if we're able to break those silos, work as a community, and really make sure that we put in place the right mechanisms to distribute value back in the hands of our people. This is the way we will succeed.
Data's not my expertise. I've worked with some data sets and tried to learn a little bit of chunking and ragging so I could understand essentially. What is the difference between different types of data then that you look at? Like there's data, then there's dirty data, then there's synthetic data.
Yes.
And then there's lots of other ones I cannot remember right now. Okay, but if you're the data queen, what are the types of data that we should be aware of?
One of the data that I was not aware of, or the type of data I was not aware of, or I had to learn how to use and how to really explore, and my entire team actually, has been geospatial data from satellite, right? Because usually when you look, for example, computer vision, so image-based data, it's usually an RGB value, so it's very easy to use. But when you start looking at satellite, it has multimodality, multiple spectral resolution, multiple temporality as well, right? And for us, that was a huge headache.
Yes, my head spinning.
Overcome.
Yes. How did you end up working with it?
We realized that actually, if we really want to capture a lot of what's happening on the continent at the ground level, satellites were the fastest way to scale, but it needed to be coupled with really ground truth. So being able to fusion that data with data that's collected on the ground, but also being able to use the appropriate mechanisms and models in machine learning and data science to extract the right insights. So this is probably the most difficult data types to work with. And we've started training data scientists and developers on the continent to do so as well, because they usually don't have access or they don't know how to use that data. So we have a partnership with Zindi, which is
a talent-based agency in
absolutely
South Africa.
Yeah, and they do hackathons. They have 100,000 developers, so we're now training them on geospatial data. We're running webinars. We've launched 4 competitions on the platform. Zindi team is amazing, and they also have that very impact-driven mission, just like us, right? So we've been working with Zindi to really up-level the rest of the ecosystem around that modality, which is one of the most important for our continent.
Up next, I'll be asking Kate Kallot on what women on the continent in Africa should be thinking about when it comes to skilling up around AI.
Right now, AI only works for major languages such as English and French. This presents an issue in Africa when it comes to accessing quality datasets that power AI technologies. You see, 76% of Rwandans only speak Kinyarwanda. Over the last 7 years, we have created datasets of over 3,400 hours of Kinyarwanda. We have now scaled to 14 other countries in Africa with datasets covering 16 additional languages. We're accelerating our work with the support of the Rwanda Centre for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, expanding African language footprint in AI technologies. By providing this foundational infrastructure, innovators can create AI solutions that reflect Africa's linguistic diversity and unique cultural realities.
You're listening to a special episode of the Embedded podcast here in Kigali, Rwanda, at the Global Summit on AI in Africa. A lot of women on the continent and the diaspora, and actually generally, more intimidated using AI tools, doing machine learning. There was a survey that was done recently that demonstrated that 25% of women were comfortable with at least trying different types of AI generative tools. As a woman inspiring others on the continent, what would you say, and what are some of the skills that women in general should be paying attention to in order to build the talent and opportunity in the sector?
I want to say that you don't have to be a data scientist. You don't have to be a machine learning engineer to work into AI. As a matter of fact, I didn't study computer science.
Well, you sure sound like you've studied a lot of computer science and
I'm self-taught in data science.
How did you self-teach in data science? On
Just
YouTube?
Passionate. I actually studied law and political sciences and then wanted to be a journalist.
Yeah, what?
Yeah.
So then how did you teach yourself all that? I mean, that's a sophisticated discipline.
It is. I actually did a year abroad in Japan when I was 21, and that's when I discovered tech, because when you go to Tokyo, technology is in your face. And one of my professors was a director at Sony, and he was teaching us about technology and how it influences behaviors. And I was like, this is what I want to do. So came back, got an internship at Intel, and then started to learn. And then at some point, I was thrown in the deep end because I ended up being product manager for one of the first AI developer kits in the world. And I had to learn everything from scratch. I had to learn how to code. I had to learn how to lead engineers. I had to learn really how to talk to developers. What was
so how did you do all
important
that?
for
You just did it. I suppose you just did it.
Yeah,
because
there's
that's the
a
only
lot
way
of
to do it.
That's the only way to do it. If you're passionate about something, you have inside you what it takes to actually learn it. And, bringing that non-technical perspective into a highly technical and scientific field, I can tell you it has its place because you're thinking about technology in a different way. You're thinking about technology on how it will impact the people around you, how it will impact the environment around you. I was just talking to a data scientist who came to me and said, hey, I'm starting. I'm really starting now. And I've started with stock trading. And I was like, I don't know how to do stock trading, but that's amazing. And she was asking me for advice as well. And I said, you know what? You're already on the right path because you're already doing it. So don't be afraid. There is space for all of us in this field and all our perspectives matter.
If I was a young woman or that particular young woman, like where, even though I was on the path, are there places or groups or tools or a particular course or online or like what would you recommend for all of us to get our heads around?
So I'll recommend two things. The first one, Coursera obviously has a lot of AI and machine learning courses. These have been around for a very long time, so it's very easy to learn online. And then the second one is actually join one of those non-traditional pathways institutions like Zindi, who self-organize, do boot camps, hackathons, because that's where you're actually finding a community and a community who is willing to help you. We host in Nairobi machine learning research happy hours. So a lot of my engineers and data scientists, please come to the next one. We would love to have you. So they're bringing the community together and they're all presenting to each other about applications they've built, the research they're working on, giving feedback to each other. So find those groups in your city and join them because it's only through the community you'll learn.
I was sitting with a group of creatives here and I've been experimenting a little bit with different platforms and generative video and audio and photo, and I had the most fun and I learned so much from them. And so that's exactly right, because it's such a new space that's evolving so quickly. Just when you think you've nailed something, you haven't. And so just that exchange of ideas is obviously really critical. When you look at the big picture and you look at governments around the continent, we're having a lot of conversations about regulation and innovation and where's the balance. What is it that our leaders really need to seriously do and think actively?
So I would think I will respond from the perspective of an entrepreneur because I'm not a politician.
Another life.
not at all. But what we need, I think, is one, easiness to do business. I think Strive mentioned it in his talk yesterday. But by that, we mean being able to set up a business in Africa has to be easy, right? Right now, it's easier for us to set up in Delaware and get funding rather to set up in Africa. So
unless you're in Rwanda.
Unless you're in Rwanda, exactly. Where are the multiple Delawares of Africa? So Rwanda could be one, but where else, We need to start making this path much easier for entrepreneurs to follow. The second one is easiness to do cross-border business as well. We are Pan-African business. I have to understand, and my CEO is at home right now pulling her hair because we're like, oh, now we need to do business in Sierra Leone, in Togo. What are the rules that we need to be aware of? And what if we want to go into Nigeria? It's very complicated. And
the complications are, what are some of the obstacles you're immediately running up against? Is it just the use of data? There are different rules across borders. They don't share. Like, what is the issue?
There is cross-border sharing in terms of data. There is also even simple things like having to set up a local entity and having to transact in local currency. So it's
then you have the exchange rate issues.
Issues. So all of this adds up. There is also the question of taxes, and we need to be able to access special economic zones, right? When you think about taxes, it makes no sense for me to pay as much taxes as the largest bank in the country because I will not survive, The second one is stability. Every month there could be a new tax that we're not aware of. And as a small business, dealing with that has much more impact than our governments will know. And this is what's driving a lot of business outside. And the third one, I would say, if we really want to have a chance in this race to AI, we need to start owning our own IP. And that is critical. But
being able to register IP in the locations that we need it, because right now you have to register it abroad, outside of the continent.
Yeah. How do we register patents? We had to register a patent in the UK, for example. It's really difficult today to register technology patents here in Africa. So how do we make it easier for our researchers and our entrepreneurs to really bring that IP on the continent?
When you look forward, how do you see the evolution of generative AI or any AI tools today that are going to transform the way that you're working going forward? I'm thinking of agentic tools and flows, models like Manus AI that had come out recently that, are demonstrating quite sophisticated reasoning capacity.
Yeah.
How do you see it? How do you see the evolution of Amini and the work that you're doing?
So I think for us is really staying focused on our goal, which is really to prepare this continent to be ready for AI and really make sure that we get that question of data right and support our community. So when we think about all these beautiful innovations that are coming, AI has been around for so long. There have been so many innovations.
We just discovered it now. That's what's going on.
So many releases. So many beautiful new model architectures. How do we sort through that noise? How do we stay focused on really the prize? How do we stay focused on building something that makes sense for the continent without being distracted by all that noise that is coming from outside? And I think that's our mission. So our team does a lot of research. And what they do is basically looking at what are the best architectures, tools that we can apply to our context, because this is really what matters. It's not the biggest general purpose model on the biggest, largest supercomputer. It's actually the most useful and usable for our people.
Which is product 101.
Yes. We tend to forget.
What is the problem we're trying to solve?
Exactly.
And all these Gen AI tools are augmenting our process, essentially.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Kate Kallot. Really appreciate all the signal in this conversation. And we kept out the noise. Thank you for being on Embedded. And I wish you the very best of luck. And I will see you in Karura Forest.
Absolutely.
When I'm in Nairobi next.
Yes.
On horseback.
On a horseback. Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this special series of Embedded, our podcast is here at the Global AI Summit on Africa in Kigali, Rwanda. I'm Zain Verjee, and I would love it if you followed us on our Substack at therundown.studio, as well as followed our Embedded podcast on Spotify. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Embedded.